A very good evening and welcome to our public journalism show, The Watchdog. This evening, we're talking about South African Airways, one of the stories that kept South Africans talking this past weekend. Our guest is the former CEO of South African Airways, Vuyani Jagana. The Watchdog starts right now.
As of the relaunch of SAA, the finances for the operations of SAA will be provided by the Takatso Consortium and not by government.
Well, a deal or not really a deal? Well, we're going to speak to the former CEO of South African Airways, the man who once upon a time actually submitted a turnaround plan for the airline, but of course he left unceremoniously. Vuyani Jagana joins me now via Zoom. Mr. Jagana, good evening. Thanks very much for your time.
Good evening, Vuyo. Good evening to your viewers.
Well, the first thing that came to mind when you heard or when this deal was announced on Friday?
Yeah, look, when I had the deal announced, so I looked at the deal architecture, I must say, from a principal point of view. So for me, the deal ticks all the boxes that are supposed to make sure that SAA is set on a path to success from a pure deal architecture. So in terms of the 51% shareholding, you look at what has been announced in terms of the players that have acquired the 51%. They carry both they have a promise of both capital pools as well as the technical skills, but also 51% begins to free SAA from the shackles of the PFMA, which gives it a chance to operate like a commercial business and compete equally with its peers.
Could the government not given them an even higher stake than 51%? What do you think could be the reasons for them wanting to retain 49%, at least for now?
To be honest with you, my view is that you would know that the whole issue of transitioning SOCs to bring in strategic equity partnership is a very contested area by different stakeholders within government and civic society. I also think that whether you're 51 or 49, it's all about decision rights and being able to invest that is capital into the business and be able to make quick decisions. So I think 51% gives a private investor certainty around decision rights, but at the same time, government is not parting away with huge chunks of equity. And South Africans must also understand that whether you own 100% of SAA, up to this point, there has been no dividend flows, no returns to the shareholder, which is government today. So I think with 49%, and if the people provide the requisite capital, financial wherewithal, and operate with a high level of commercial and technical skills, there's probably a fair chance that government will realize a return on investment at 49%.
But, I mean, how will it affect decision-making? Because, I mean, with government still having, the 49% it has decided to keep, how will that affect decision-making? Will the airline be as agile as everyone says it should be?
My view is that it should be as agile as everyone says it should be, because the single biggest impediment to SOEs that are operating in a highly commercial market space is the rules around the Public Finance Management Act, and those rules become very unique to the SOCs. The peers that compete with SOCs are not subjected to those rules. And let's also be clear that even private sector businesses have governance protocols, and so on. The difference with private sector is that the people who make decisions around those protocols have both the upside and the downside of their decision. Therefore, they apply due diligence and decisions are made within the business. The challenge with PFMA, it takes those decision rights outside the board, outside the management team, and at times to people who only face downside of potential wrong decision being made, and they will not see the upside, and there's no penalty for that. So I think 51% outside the PFMA, I don't see why the 49% should be an issue at all.
Now, Takatso is going to invest over 3 billion over 3 years. Those figures, do they sound right to you, or will they need more, do you think?
To be honest with you, my sense is that those figures, ballpark, sound right. If you're a startup, it depends on the strategy that they adopt. So given where we are, the biggest issue with SAA has always been, part of it has been the international business. That's outside just the general operations, commercial logic, and so on. The international business has been a drag on the P&L of SAA. Now, if you start up the business in a COVID era, you start with domestic and regional and focus there and tie up commercial JVs on the industrial part, which means it's about cost sharing, opportunity sharing with some of the players, given the thin international travel market today. I think it just depends. If you start with all and sundry, every route, then you're going to face challenges with that kind of amount of money, in my view. But actually, if you sequence it well, you have what I call sustainable growth rate post-COVID. That is, in a COVID era, you can build a reasonable good business over a period of time.
Now, I mean, in a statement that was released today, the PIC says it is not a member of the Takatso consortium and they have nothing to do with it. Now, considering the fact that the PIC owns 30% of Harith General Partners, and Harith, of course, being part of the Takatso consortium, how should we read that? What exactly does it mean to the layperson like me?
I actually think the biggest challenge is that, for me, not much detail around the deal has been put out in public as yet. It's very, very difficult to begin to comment on the funding structure of Takatso or otherwise. But my view is that the deal structure on its own, if you look at it at face value, takes SA out of the shackles of PFMA. There's a big promise that the equity partners have got deep capital pools. And thirdly, there is a good view that they have the necessary technical and aviation skills. If you look at those three indicators, that's good enough. However, whether what's backing Takatso and otherwise, I think it's too early for anyone to comment at this stage, unless people have insights that hasn't been put in public. So I wouldn't be able to venture and comment in that regard.
Well, because, I mean, there was no open invitation, that situation has led to, as you have just pointed out, people not understanding what this deal actually means, because there was no, sharing of information as to why Takatso and not other people, or whether, in fact, there were no other people out there who would have perhaps put in a better deal.
Yeah, look, one would hope that government would have done the sums and checked the processes. It's hard to land into an outcome like this without doing the homework. So I would want to put trust that there has been a lot of thinking in terms of process, and to get to this level, a lot of the boxes have been ticked. So that's what I would hope for. So I wouldn't want to speculate at this stage.
Okay, I did invite the department, of course, and they refused to come on and explain some of these things. But I have been told by somebody that a couple of years ago, an offer of, I think, 2.5 billion US dollars was actually made for SAA, subject to, of course, lots of conditions. Do you know anything about that?
No, when I was there at SAA, no such offer had come my way, and I had not been tracking SAA prior to me joining SAA. Certainly, if an offer like that would have come, it would have been a priority, because during the time I was there, SAA was undergoing a very serious cash constraints, and we all sought to find methods through which we can actually get the business out of the hole. So I'm not aware. So I haven't seen any of that. There has been no such offer during my time.
Remind us again of what you found at SAA when you joined.
Obviously, the big challenge with SAA was around the one of what I say it's a debt burden. So the company was lumbered with debt. There's been a history of the government raising guarantees instead of putting equity into the business. Any business has got maximum debt capacity. That is the threshold in which debt becomes counterproductive. And I think the debt levels at SAA were too high for the business of that size. And many South Africans will always talk about bailouts. They say, yes, at times government had to put the check, but a lot of those were guarantees. And if you put guarantees and you put the equity, then you stifle the business, because a lot of the transactions becomes expensive because your balance sheet is fragile. So then your suppliers begin to put you into very difficult terms in terms of payment conditions and so on. So effectively, you're not being set up for success. So capital structure a problem based on history of loss making, but also the fact that government hardly really put equity into that business. The second area was around the commercial execution. I think SAA was a good operation, good customer care results. The team did very well, take off on time. However, the commercial logic behind that was challenging, because you have to make sure that you can compete and deliver services at a profit to be able to sustain yourself. So skills at the commercial level was one of the things I had identified as some of the challenges. But the single biggest obstacle as well on the third one was just the speed of execution. It's hard to think that you can take a SOE that's in a commercial space and subject it to rules of a government department, and therefore you are not matching your game with that of competitors. If you look at it, there's nothing wrong in being state-owned. If you look at the Fortune Global 500, the last time I checked, there were over 124 companies that were SOEs from China. So ownership is less of an issue. It's how you enable your business to succeed. So those were the three fundamental issues. And of course, cost. Rationalizing cost was one of some of the issues I had to look into.
Now, the taxpayer, of course, is still going to fork out over about 3.5 billion to clear SAA's old debts. Do those numbers sound about right to you? Will that take care of the historical debt?
So, to be honest with you, I've been out of that business now for almost 2 years. So, I've not been keeping track how much capital has been put in as part of the business rescue program and so on. I'm uncomfortable to give a view on those numbers, because I haven't been close enough. There may have been capital injection that may have reduced the debt level from 9.2 to the numbers you're quoting. But I know when I left, SAA was sitting at 9.2 historic debt that was in its books. So I'm not sure how much of that has been chipped away to get to those numbers. So I would hate to speculate, but we know that there was a need to reduce debt on SAA.
Now, well, given the fact that these guys are going to take over an airline that has already lost its market share, and with very few assets, really, how would you rate their prospects or the chances of succeeding?
I actually think that they have got great chances of success, because many people will realize that airlines are largely asset-light entities. So even airlines that have got strong balance sheet, that have got fleet, they tend to put the fleet into a leasing company, which is an internal leasing company. So the operating company of the airline is asset light. It tends to lease from its sister company that does leasing, and that's part of financial engineering. So I don't think that, yes, you would like to have assets that in the real estate space that generate non-aviation revenues that begins to cushion you during the rainy days, if you like, or stormy days. However, if you look at it, airline is about precision operation. You don't own the airport, you don't own the aircraft. All suppliers, you kind of the operator. So you have to operate with precision, cost, forecast, better negotiation, commercial logic. And if you look at SAA today, they have endowment with routes. So the single biggest asset in an airline is traffic rights and routes. So therefore, they are spoiled for choice. They can pick which routes to fly and how frequent they can fly. So I think they stand a chance to succeed if they become a good operator. Airline is about operating a business that use third-party assets and operate them at a profit. So, and even now they have a fair chance because COVID has slowed down everyone else. All competitors are fragile today. So to catch up and surpass, it's a matter of commercial logic and commercial execution. It's unlike when there was no COVID. So you'd have lost share. So everyone, the market share is no longer the same. No one is strong in aviation today. So even startups can catch up and surpass or compete equally with the incumbents. So I don't think they're in a disadvantage. Actually, COVID is actually an equalizer for them as a startup.
Now, there's hundreds of pilots that the SAA employed, and over the weekend you would have seen we're talking to some of the unions after my conversation with you, and they are complaining about not having been consulted. And on the other hand, you have the consortium saying it's not going to deal with any legacy issues. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I guess obviously one would have hoped that everyone has been engaged. However, during times of crisis, hard calls can be made. And it doesn't mean we should trade off the rights of workers or of pilots, if you like. I also think that it's fair if it's not part of the deal to re-engage. It would only be fair for a private investor to actually look at the airline from now moving forward. I think the issue of whether employees have been adequately engaged is a very important point, because the airline flies with cabin crew, ground crew, as well as pilots. So one would hope that in the whole process, keep in mind that this is not just a reset. This comes out of business rescue, which had its own pains and sacrifices. So one would hope that these things have been taken into account. I have not been close enough to the process. I wouldn't be able to give a view that's specific, albeit that we all hear the protests and complaints by different groups within SA.
What was your experience with the unions that operate in the SAA space?
I think we had a very good, robust relationship with unions in SAA. Keep in mind that when I was there, SAA, it was very clear, it did not need rocket science, that unless the people of SAA act together to get out of the hole, we may lose everything. So at some point, we fought and we found each other. Part of finding each other is about transparency. It's about onboarding people to what needs to be done, and obviously showing people that it's not people first. You have to transform the business first, take out costs in operations in other areas, and if ever you're going to have to go for people, you go to people as a last resort. So and by that time, everyone else would have been clear about what needs to be done. Part of what we committed to do with everyone at SA was that if we take out cost, every rand of cost we take out, it may save just one more job. And the unions were clear about this, and we're transparent. We're running bilaterals, joint forums, We took some of the unions in the technical area actually to Germany to go and see what best looks like, because Lufthansa Technik was going to set up shop and compete with us. And I needed to make sure that we mark them toe to toe. And it wouldn't make sense for me to just tell the unions that we need to do this. I needed to show them how they operate, and in a number of areas. And I think those issues gave greater transparency. Do I think we never fought, we never disagreed? We disagreed on a number of areas, but there were more areas that we agreed on. And the areas where we disagreed, we all were clear that these were troubling areas that we need to find an elegant solution to. So I was quite comfortable that we were finding each other. Could I have wanted us to move faster? Yes, I would have wanted to understand each other faster, but at times you have to be patient because of people's livelihoods.
Mr. Khan, I'm going to ask you to stay put. I'm going to bring in the unions for a second and hear what they have to say. And I would like to have your view of what they are saying, what they'll be saying shortly. We're going to bring in the workers in a short while. Don't go away.
Why were the employees of NUMSA and the Cabin Crews Association not consulted? Were they asked to be equity partners in SAA? Because what we've subsequently heard is that, so that's number one. Number two is that the information that was released by the Department of Public Enterprises and Takatso was not enough for me as an analyst of these issues to make a proper decision as to what is happening. And thirdly, there was a perception that the consortium paid 3 billion rands for 51% stake. So what I clarified on social media was that no, there was no money that changed hands. On the face of it, they seem to have paid nothing for this 51% stake, which is rather absurd because now many South Africans, the unions must be wondering, if this thing was available for free, why didn't you ask us as the unions to participate in this transaction? So these are some of the problems that we should be talking about. It seems like a sweetheart deal. And as you talked about, there's also there's a mass, privatization, deregulation of state-owned enterprises.
Well, we're now joined by the Deputy President of the South African Cabin Crews Association, Advocate Chris Shabangu. Good evening, Advocate. Thanks very much for your time. What is your organization's standpoint on the deal as it was announced on Friday by the Public Enterprises Minister?
Good evening to you and to the viewers, and good evening, Mr. Chahana. Look, the first surprise is that we got the news like everybody else, like the nation was given the news. That's when we also got the news that now there is a strategic equity partner. We were not involved before then, so we were just as surprised as everybody else, which of course then raises a lot of questions from our side.
And did you then speak to Public Enterprises to say, how did this happen?
Like, the honest thing to say now to you about the Public Enterprises is that we have been engaged with them for quite over a year and a half ago. We've been engaging with the department, and unfortunately they've been not been honest to their word. To put it straight, they haven't been honest to their word, so they've been changing. So as far as we're concerned, what we knew is that they were still looking for a strategic partner, which we had hoped that as unions are going to be involved in all of those talks. So as it stands right now, we don't even know how that strategic partner, the current strategic partner that's been announced, how they were chosen, what criteria was used, what effect is that going to have to the employees at SAA. Even the deal itself at 49%. You must remember now, you actually are selling a state-owned company. Let us understand exactly why you're doing what you're doing. How is that deal structured? What does the 49% entail? What does the 51% entail? So we don't have answers to that as it stands.
How would you describe your relationship with Public Enterprises?
To be honest with you, at this particular moment, the word that comes to mind is, I don't know, I wouldn't, there isn't that much of a relationship, because if there was, we would have known about this. You must also remember at the same time, we have been calling for a strategic partner as unions at SAA. We have been calling for, particularly when Mr. Chakane was still there, we were calling for a strategic partner. But the thing is, the difference is, we understood exactly what we were calling for. We knew. I'll use an example. For example, we were calling for Ethiopian Airlines to be heard in terms of what they were offering. And even then, we had an understanding, as Mr. Chakane had said earlier, we had an understanding of exactly what that entailed for the workers and for the company SAA. We've always been of the view that South African Airways as a company is a viable company, if it's put in the right hands. So unfortunately, what has happened right now is that the DPE, in our view, they've just decided to demonstrate exactly what they have been doing, or actually their contribution to the fall of South African Airways over the years, or SOEs over the years, where they fail to involve the people that are impacted by the decisions they make.
What do you ascribe that attitude to? The attitude of not consulting with you, not even talking, to you?
I'll be blunt. To me, personally, it looks like a strategic way of just, making sure that these entities fail. This, you can take it across all SOEs. But particularly on SAA, it looks like it was a strategic way of making South African Airways fail. If you're going to be telling me today, I'm not a financial guru of any kind, but if you're going to be telling me today that you have a strategic partner who's probably going to be bringing, or assumably going to be bringing in some 3 billion, and that's going to be enough to start an airline, whether you're starting it with 1 aircraft or 3 aircraft, it doesn't really matter. But you have failed to do so in so many years ago. It's suspicious to us. That's all I can say on that one.
Now, the taxpayer is still going to fork out 3.5 billion to clear old debts. What is your understanding of what that money is going to cover?
From my side, as again, I've been getting questions as to, at least let me put it this way: we have heard the minister saying that SAA it's the end of an era where SAA will be getting bailouts from the public. I don't necessarily think so, and we cannot even doesn't take it to genius to understand that the 3 billion obviously is going to be paid by the taxpayer. As we speak. So it is very imperative. It was important for the DPE to include us in this bid so that we understand actually all of that, so that we can actually even come back not only to the workers, but come back to the public and tell them, hopefully this is the last time we are satisfied as unions that whatever deal that is going to do is going to work. As it stands now, the only thing that I can say to you is that one can be happy about is that the workers will at least be going back to work. How many of them? We don't know. Under which conditions will they be going back to work? We don't know. What is going to be happening to the transformation agenda? We don't know, because we're not part of that. All we know is that we've just been told that something might be done, but nothing on paper really, as it stands right now.
Now, the SAA Pilots Association, which we wanted we invited as well, released a statement that said they will not say anything more than what they say in the statement. The statement says we'll be engaging with all parties to more fully understand what this latest announcement and development means for the airline and for SAA pilots. And then the statement goes on to say SAA has unlawfully withheld salaries and payments due to SAPA pilots from 2019 and from the period before the lockout that started on 18 December 2020. SAPA's members have not been paid in more than 15 months, and we hope that this new development will help to bring an end to this unfair and vindictive action against pilots and their family. I suppose you are in the same boat, isn't it?
Absolutely. The workers at SAA have experienced the most. It's not only the pilots, but the workers at SAA have experienced the most. They have lost their houses, they've lost their cars, their lives have been changed. So in reality, if this deal is gonna change that, one, is happy. But again, what you don't want is that you don't want a deal that is going to seem dubious, if I'm going to put it that way. As much as we want people to go back to it, we need some assurances. They need some assurances, job security and all of that stuff. There's a lot of things that we need to talk about, as much as we are happy that they might be going to work. But it is, as I said, important to understand under what conditions are they going back to work. What is this deal? One of the examples that I will give you, there's nothing wrong with giving a stake to the workers. To even increase the chance of bringing more workers to the new airline. So there may be positives if we get the right strategic partner. You must also, when I say right strategic partner, I'm talking about the fact that we don't know the strategic partner. If you were to take that further, there are subsidiaries that you still need to deal with where workers are still going to be affected. So as much as we're happy that South African workers are going to be coming back to work, you also face with the situation now where the subsidiary might have to shed jobs because their path is not clear as to what is happening there. We don't know what this deal has for those subsidiaries.
Now, the consortium says that it won't be dealing with any legacy issues. What is your interpretation of what that could mean?
Well, look, I would think at this moment they're basically talking about the debt that SAA has. I would think they were talking about other labor issues that South African has. Maybe evergreen contracts that they were talking about, probably, I don't know. On my part, I'm basically just guessing right now. And it would have been better for me to come and sit and, here on your studio and tell the public, actually, this is what they're talking about. This is what in this case, unfortunately, I can't. I'm just speculating like everybody else.
Now, when you get an opportunity to meet with government representatives, what are you going to say to them? What will you be putting on the table?
We haven't discussed that as a union. We haven't even discussed that with our partners, which is NUMSA. But the first question that would come to anybody's mind, certainly on my mind, is why were we left out of this deal? Who were the other bidders of this deal? Of this deal. Why were they also, what criteria was used? Because have you probably maybe left out somebody else that could have even brought a better deal to the situation? Now, I'm not going to say to you, I'm doubting the expertise of the guys that are coming in now. No, that's not what I'm saying at all. But I'm basically just saying the way it has been done, it just raises a lot of suspicions and questions that the department will need to answer. As I said, one of the questions is why were we left out? Who were the bidders? Those are the questions that would be asked.
I understand some parties are mooting the idea of a court challenge. Would you be part of something like that if you were to be asked?
You mean of joining any court challenge?
Yes.
At this moment, no. It is quite premature for us to be saying that until we really have a clear understanding of what's going on. Who knows? Probably when we sit and then we sit with the department, we might be given something that we can accept. But at this moment, it's not easy for me to say we'll definitely be joining any court challenge. But I must stress out the fact that when it comes to the subsidiaries that have been left hanging, the department might have to answer maybe in court on that issue.
Okay. We did invite NUMSA. They are weighing up their options. I don't know what they are going to say, but they are as unhappy as you are. But would you, if the government was to come to you and apologize for the way they have treated you, and then say, but we want you to be part of this thing, what are the two things that you would insist on? If there's a way of still, taking your concerns on board.
What is important to us right now is workers. That's our number one goal: is workers and them coming back to work. And secondly, it is quite true that we have to understand, the issue of the agility of decision-making agility is actually important, but that obviously would have been covered in the deal itself, I understand, because then the 51% would probably take care of that issue, because the government then will be a little bit hands-off the asset itself and allow expertise or allow the strategic partner to run the airline. So in that front, I think then obviously that will be covered up. I'll be really surprised if that is not covered. However, on our part, the most important thing is workers. And the other part that's very important is the issue of how then are you going to be dealing with that part of SAA's mandate, which is SAA is a developmental airline, which was not meant to make, I'll say this loudly, which was not meant to make any profit, but to be able to sustain itself. Yes, they may be able to be taking back some money to the shareholder, but the mandate is to be a developmental airline. So those issues, we are going to have to be talking about them and see how then is the new strategic partner going to be dealing with such issues and many more other issues.
Okay. I'm also park you for a second. I'm going to bring back Mr. Jahana here. Mr. Jahana, having listened to the advocate here, just what immediately comes to mind? Do you think that the government and the unions will be able to find one another even after the mishap of not having engaged them during this process?
I think there should always be a room to find one another, because I don't think there's a luxury of time. So SAA has to get back into the skies. The COVID relief in terms of market competitiveness may not stay long. We need to leverage. I think they need to leverage the gap they've got to actually get back into the skies. I think South Africans have a history of finding solutions, and what it takes is willingness and openness to engage, because it's not like we're dealing with an airline that's flying, that's profitable today. We're dealing with an airline that has to be started up. I still think that if the two parties get into the room and discuss, they should be able to find one another. I think it's far from a case of saying the horse is bolted. There should be mechanism through which people can have a discussion and find each other. I mean, there's a lot of other things at SAA, subsidiaries and other things that warrant a lot of conversation, if I may put it that way. So I just think that parties need to engage and find one another.
I mean, if you were a prospective buyer, is it not in your interests, to make sure that, you've got everyone on board?
So I'll give you two answers to this. Answer number one is the one of a very social engagement, a good feel about it, to say we have to do things together, we have to get better settlement. That's always have to be the first prize, to make sure to the extent possible, trade-offs and sacrifices are understood. They are made and understood why they are being made. So that's the one thing. It will be good to do so. But actually, if I take a very simple clinical view, if I were to be the buyer of SAA, I'm being clinical now, not bring any of the emotions. I would simply say the market is awash with a lot of aircrafts. There's a lot of skilled pilots, that not SAA only pilots, for example. Globally, there's a market oversupply of capacity, and also there's oversupply of labor given the COVID scenario. So effectively, you can therefore say, let me just be clinical about it and move forward. I do think, though, that in a South African context, it makes sense for the government and the unions to continue to engage on some of the elements. But as a buyer, the conditions are there, are fertile for you. You can get pilots from across the globe a lot more easy, because COVID has affected, it's not just the airline industry. In most industries, there have been job shedding. So if you start a business, except for ICT and agriculture, you have the opportunity to build the team you want and the size of the team you want. So two answers here. The good part of it is to say government and labor must engage and find some answers together. But as a buyer, you could say, well, actually, there's much oversupply of everything. So what I need to do is to make sure I can optimize the combination of all these elements to make sure that I make sure I build a better airline, a successful airline. So it just depends on what's in the mind of everyone.
Okay, we're going to take a quick ad break, and after the break, we'll get your last words, gentlemen.
SAA will be owned by a partnership between government and a strategic equity partner. Having evaluated the current environment, government has agreed to the SEP owning 51% of the shareholding and government 49% of the shareholding. The strategic equity partner is known as Takatso, which is a consortium, and the word Takatso in Sotho means aspire. And this consortium is 51% black-owned. It brings together two very resourceful entities, Harith, which is a funder, an infrastructure investor, and an airport owner, and Global Airways, which has sufficient and interesting experience in the airline industry. This is, as our statement indicates, a demonstration of South Africa's ability to develop an entirely homegrown solution to successfully relaunch SAA, as I pointed out earlier, as a sustainable, competitive, and transformed airline. And once again, so that we understand this clearly, this airline is not dependent on the fiscus.
Mr. Chakwana, I've got Mtoko here on Twitter saying, was this the kind of equity partner you had in mind when you were SA CEO? And after that advocate, he continues, says, why are the unions not fighting for the inclusion of SAA employees and workers in the equity stake after their long suffering? Let me start with you, Mr. Chakwana.
Yeah, I think, to be honest with you, what I sought to do in the SCP, keep in mind that we had not started the process when I was there. So what I sought to do was to put together commercial joint ventures, especially in the international domain, because I saw that was where the biggest exposure was. So we started with Air Mauritius commercial JV to test and see whether the time it would take competition authorities to approve such commercial JVs, because they probably would have been more or less the first time for them to do this. I speak under correction. So once we've done that, when we had it under our belt, we started approaching, talking to Ethiopian Airlines, seeking to pull together a international commercial JV. It's all about cost sharing, opportunity sharing, and resource optimization, and so on. So we had not gotten to this point where we said what kind of SCP would be. And I have a sense that had perhaps the international side of the JVs had worked, there probably would have been a quasi-SCP kind of arrangement in that fashion, that backed up by possibly the right kind of funding structure, and obviously the ability to be exempted from the PFMA for at least 3 years until we break even. So this was the combination of things we're trying to do. Obviously, there was a process that government had to start around the SCP. So we cannot, I can't second guess how government would think about. However, the current outcome where there's an investor whom we are told has got capital pools, then there's a skilled aviation skills in the investors themselves, but also the 51% takes SAA out of the bureaucracy of PFMA. Then it puts SAA, everything else equal, in almost the same path that telecom has traversed over a period of time. And I think that's why I'm saying the deal itself, in the face of it, it looks like the right deal if you are no longer going for commercial JVs. I mean, the time horizon has moved. We must move with it. I do think, though, that, and I'm not venturing into whether who should have been involved, what the process was. I was not part of that process, but in the face of it, assuming everything is right, the deal architecture sets SAA into a path to perform competently against its own peers.
Advocate, why are you not fighting? Why are workers not going to fight for inclusion?
Okay. Well, the first thing I can say is that about probably a year ago, if I'm not mistaken, I can't remember, we wrote a letter to the board of SAA. And what on that letter said, we actually proposed the inclusion of SA workers mistaken SAA. So to answer that question is that it's not like we haven't even raised that point. We have raised that point even with the DP. And I must be honest again, with the DP, when we were still talking and had, relations very good, they also thought of that idea. Now, in this situation, we unfortunately were not able to raise that because we were not part of it. We were not party to the negotiations. We don't even know when they started. But had we been part of it, we definitely would have raised that question, that point, and we still will raise it going forward, even an opportunity with the DPE if we have to sit down with them, which hopefully will happen soon.
Now, here's a question that I'm going to direct to both of you, starting with you, Mr. Jachana. Sfiso Mthembu Gabadela says, what's going to happen with the SAA subsidiaries? Because the minister didn't give us a clear answer. I know both of you don't know, but what do you think is possibly going to happen?
Well, we don't know. So I think, again, it comes down to the deal structure. So the deal could also give a possible segue to subsidiaries, or subsidiaries could follow a completely different process, because even though they are subsidiaries, they are standalone entities on their own. So it will be difficult to second guess, because the deal content is not yet, we have no visibility on it. But you have two ways: either the deal is a package deal, or then there will be a separate process for subsidiaries in terms of their own evaluation. And those subsidiaries have got licenses, very important licenses, which needs slick operation. So there's value in them in terms of the future. If you look at SAT, for example, is only maintenance and repair organization in Southern Africa, so to speak, that's strong and capable. But of course, it needs to be run profitable on a sustainable basis. Mango has licenses, as I've said. So there are opportunities there. It depends. We can't guess it. So we'll wait until the process unfolds.
Why do you think government has no appetite to look at something like Ethiopian Airlines, for example? I know this is an idea that was mooted some years ago, and Ethiopian Airlines were actually keen to, partner with SAA somehow.
I wouldn't say the government has no appetite. I just think that these things are about timing. So everything is an opportunity at that point in time to call it. So if you were at the time that we're discussing having preliminary discussion with Ethiopia, there was appetite. The market was not looking the way it is looking. They were interested in exploring partnership on the international side, because then it would aggregate traffic for them, because a big percentage of international travel into the continent is coming to South Africa. And therefore, if you have got a very strong international partnership, then you are able to, Ethiopia would leverage the rights of SAA and bring in their capacity and so on, and then we have a JV. So that's about timing. At that point in time, a lot happened, and we didn't take the discussion further. I would argue now that it would be difficult to pull through a JV like that, because everyone is trying to looking at themselves to survive. Probably the SCP route that has been taken, given the timing, is most probably the most feasible route today, other than JVs, given the COVID and the fact that everyone is fragile. Everyone is looking to survive. They are looking less about partnering with other people at this stage. That's my take on the airline industry.
Well, some positive responses from Patrick Chauke on Twitter says, great insights from Vuyani Jachana, very upbeat about the SAA Takatsa deal. Thus far, it sounds like a deal. Last word from you, Advocate.
The quick one that I wanted to answer is that you asked a very important question about subsidiaries. Subsidiaries, as we speak, and I'll be direct, Mango, and Mr. Vianney is absolutely correct in saying those are viable airlines and entities or subsidiaries that are supposed to be taken care of. As it stands now, obviously, you're going to be hearing from us during the week where we need to understand exactly what's happening with Mango. Mango is, as an airline, is just standing there with the workers not knowing what's happening. At least, I know that SA Express is not a subsidiary, but at least give them an opportunity to know what's going on. Be clear as a DPE and say exactly what you want to do with the subsidiary so that the workers can start organizing themselves as they are organizing themselves at Express. The only issue at Express, we're just waiting for the DPE and the liquidators to make a decision on to give the people of Express a chance. So when it comes to subsidiaries, tell the subsidiaries what is your plan so that they can take care of themselves or they can make a plan moving forward. That's all I have to say on that one. Thank you.
Okay. Gentlemen, I have to thank both of you for coming through for us this evening. Advocate, Mr. Chahana, thank you to both of you. Okay, we did, of course, as I said earlier, invite the Department of Public Enterprises, but they refused to come on the show. NUMSA, for its part, says it's weighing its options and should be able to come up with a position over the next couple of days. But it's a matter they say they take very, very seriously, and they're going to stop at nothing to fight for workers' rights. Well, that's all we had time for this evening. Thank you very much for watching. Do join us again tomorrow evening, same time. Have a good night.